Thank you, Steve. Basically, El Salto means the leap, which is, what many Hispanics need to go through, or anybody that comes to this country, but, particularly people from Spanish-speaking countries, coming from poor backgrounds that really don't have access to technology. But for many years, it was more than a double problem because they also didn't have access to connectivity. So you don't have the equipment and you don't have the connection. So you're basically from a different age. So you come here and, you don't know how to use an ATM machine. So it's very hard, and it was very hard, and for many people it still is, to, come into a country that is, fully connected, that everything is done electronically nowadays, that to find a job, to do anything, you have to go and, jump into the superhighway. And I was lucky enough to, to be able to, have worked for, Cisco Systems and, a few other higher profile companies. But I realized that many people weren't that lucky. And, I felt that sense of mission, that it was a time to go and, and share with the world. So I have a couple slides here in my presentation. Let me share it with you guys. Okay, so share. Here it is. Let me make this big. Okay, do you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so since then, I was basically the only voice.
We can see like presenter view.
Oh, okay, so let me change screens then.
Yeah, swap that, sorry.
Does that work now?
Now we're seeing a multi-screen collage.
Yeah, I have 3 screens, so it gets a little, hold on.
I think that might be your slide though. Your slide just has a bunch of pictures of like you on TV.
Yes.
Then you're good.
So, there we go. So since then, I started showing up on TV, talking about technology, and even that was a huge challenge because, back then when you would go to a TV producer and you would tell them that you wanted to talk about technology, they said, Hispanics don't care about that. They have no interest in that. And of course, whenever, I did my first few appearances talking about identity theft and things that were, early, even back then, I'm talking about, over 10 years ago, they got a huge reception, and, people were paying attention and they were interested. So it led to many other TV appearances, and eventually I ended up being basically the tech guy in Spanish for Univision. Everybody confuses it. I mean, I was in Telemundo, but Univision is actually a bigger network in Spanish. But like I say, I mean, we're invisible. Like you don't know, and most people don't know who the #1 Asia Kung Fu star is. You don't, because you don't live there. So even though we live here in the United States, in the world of TV in Spanish, nobody knows, who we are unless you speak Spanish. And it's normal because, it really doesn't cross over, but it's fine. In the morning shows that we do weekly, bi-weekly, we reach over 1 million people with a messaging about technology. And of course, we get a barrage of messages and emails, basically asking for the most basic questions, including, tech support. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting self-proclaimed job, no? So
well, I recall that you and I did a Tecnificate at College of the Canyons. Mm-hmm. And we got incredible coverage from Despierta Today, with interviews of you and everything that went nationwide. I forgot millions of viewers everywhere. But it was all in Spanish. And so naturally, no one in the Chancellor's office or anyone else heard about it. So as far as they were concerned, nothing happened.
Yep.
And that's when I began to realize that there's this divide between the Spanish speaking and the English speaking. And certainly as educators, we need to know how to reach out and do that. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just...
No, please go ahead. I mean, this is more of a conversation.
Yeah, it really hit me when that happened.
And Steve, you're super experienced in this, and you've been there from the beginning. So, many of the challenges. So then, based on all of this, I decided to, write a book and publish a book. It got picked up by Random House. We went nationwide with it. The book did really well. And of course, it created, more questions and people, trying to find out, what's going on. and it was basically a technology primer in Spanish. So it was more of a, really, really basic, what do you need to do? You come here or you live here, you're not connected. What are some of the steps that you need to take? But I mean, the most important thing that I tried to do was to open minds, to get people to really start thinking about technology, not about what would happen at that time. The book came out in 2012, so it's been 7 years already. So, and I'm still working on number 2 and number 3, but, I have like 3 in the works, but eventually they'll get published. But the point is that, I still get a lot of questions on some of the basic things and some of the basic concepts that people are still trying to grasp from the first one, which was, you need to come here and you need to learn to learn. In many of our cultures, we really don't know how to learn. We really, are used to, something, very, archaic and not very dynamic. And with all the technology that we have access to, I think that many people, don't understand and don't necessarily take advantage of the many opportunities that they may have. So we did this initiative called the Tecnifica Day Conference, where we went to, how many colleges was it? It was a dozen or more, and we, these events, and then here we go. We would get a couple hundred people show up. The interesting thing was, who showed up to this many events. I mean, it was people that had, very humble backgrounds, people that came with, notepads, they wanted to learn. You see mothers who come with their kids, with their families, they wanted to see what this was about. And it was really about bringing people from the community, people that were connected with tech, and showing people how cool it was, to do all these technology things, how to use these apps, how to leverage their phones, their communications, why they needed, fast internet connection, why was it important for their kids to really start thinking and specializing about, technology and, technology related fields and STEM. And in one of them, this event, we brought somebody from NASA. There was a Latino that basically, he's one of the guys that designs a part of the Mars rover. And then, you see people there, it's like, this is the first time that they've seen somebody like that. And they say, well, they look like us, they look like me. I mean, this is attainable, this is achievable. And we, people, I think that, got out of those events and they were ready to do something, they were ready to start, looking at this as a possibility. And I mean, and that was the objective, and, bringing to a college setting, seeing that this is actually possible, that this is achievable. And of course, we got a lot of press from it. We got national press, we got newspapers, we had all over the place. But again, like Steve mentioned, it was all in Spanish. So it was basically, it had a huge impact in the community. But then if you speak English, you never know that any of this stuff happened. So,
well, and I'd like to cut in again, because when I was sitting in the audience, of course, I don't speak Spanish. I'm just sitting there watching people and listening to you talk, and you talk a mile a minute, and then you bring up all these other people, and they would talk a mile a minute too. And of course, they were executives from major companies, sales experience, and you could see the kind of the awakening happening on people in the body language. Everybody was leaning forward, everybody was taking notes, and sometimes these events would last 3 or more hours, and nobody left. Everybody was taking notes the whole time. And then afterwards, they're all lining up to see you and have their picture taken with you and everything. It was astounding to see that kind of focused attention. And I realized what a huge need that is, and you were filling it. And as you share, people don't realize how accessible this is. And I think one of the benefits we saw of that was that many of these people were parents of students, and it informed them on how their students can pursue a life in technology when maybe before that was not something they thought about.
Right. And I mean, when we, what we found, and, by starting then, that type of conference and traveling around the state, and of course, talking to people, we found that, and this has been very well documented, that, there's still a digital divide in connectivity. There's still a digital divide in connectivity in the rural areas, especially in California, but also the fact of, what type of device people own. Many people own like very old computers, if they even own a computer. So one of the things that some of the studies have said, and I found it myself, is that the first experience for many Hispanics of an internet connection is through a mobile phone, and it's through a mobile screen. So I mean, that's comparable to many places in other continents. But it's interesting that in this country, many people, their first experience of the internet is not through a desktop computer, is through a mobile phone. So is great, but it's also very limiting, because as you very well know, many of the interfaces and many of the places that you need to access are still not mobile friendly, and we're in 2019. So imagine 10 years ago, it was even worse. Still, many government type of websites are not mobile friendly. And so it's very hard to navigate. It's very hard to read, and people still don't know how to use many of the tools, especially Spanish speaking. They still don't know how to use many of the tools for simple translation online. So many people will go see a site that's in English and say, oh, well, I don't understand that, and go do something else. So a couple of studies found that 70% had broadband access, and what we've seen, and especially when we do segments on technology, I do a lot of gadget segments on the Fiat America, like the coolest and greatest. And I mean, the purpose of that from the beginning, for at least for me, was to show people how cool technology is. I mean, I think that people like gadgets, people like things that do weird things. And, when you go on TV and you show, how cool these gadgets are, that sparks an interest. And, you see a lot of people that have a positive reaction. And overall, Hispanics are fast adopters of new technologies, but they still lag behind when it comes to connectivity. And, you see some of the numbers like lagging behind in having, a desktop computer, in having home broadband. They have mobile phones because, it's obviously their, the main means of communication these days, but overall they are behind. Now, what you find, and this is according to a Brookings Institution study that basically says that, Hispanics, they make up 17% of the U.S. workforce, but I'm sorry for my pronunciation. I don't speak English very often these days. So I speak in Cuban with a very heavy American accent. So you have less than 7% of Hispanics in STEM positions. And then when you look at the workforce diversity reports from Google, Twitter, Facebook, you find that they're around the 3-4% mark. So, I like to say, and I don't mean it in any, demeaning way. It's like, there are definitely a lot more, Hispanic, people taking care of the garden that, working behind their computers. And, and it's a shame because, I mean, when you look at the numbers of Hispanics in California, especially, they are, it's the highest Hispanic population in the nation. So there are several problems that contribute to this, and, of how we've gotten here. And what I found through our, all these years of, speaking to people, like all kinds of events, of, interacting with them online, offline, through TV, I found, a few interesting things. So according to the same study from the Brookings Institution, from 2010 to 2016, it's actually is getting worse for some of this representation of Hispanics workings in Hispanic workers in tech and math. So now there's some good news among all this, is that yes, college enrollment, it has gone up, and it has consistently gone up. But what you find is that it's gone up, but it's not good enough, and there are huge, dropout rates in the Hispanic community. This was a study by Georgetown University on Education and Workforce, and you find that Hispanics are still behind. Even, it's gotten way better, but they're still behind in college enrollment. So now, the good news among all this is that college is a very big goal, but Latinos are actually more likely to finish a certificate program compared to whites and blacks, which is, interesting. It gives you something to think about. So what we found throughout the years is that Hispanic students, they have a lot of obstacles coming into an educational system, starting from, their academic preparation. And this way, it starts to happen way before they get to college. they already come to college and they're really not ready. So it's a lot harder for them to achieve, and it's complicated. Then we have a lot of what they call first generation problems, which is lack of stability, lower paying jobs, a lot of challenges in the family. Then you have a lot of lack of information in language, even though especially in California colleges do a pretty good job about putting out the information in language. But what I found and what I've seen in many cases is that this information is at the college, but people have to actually get there to get it. So I think that there's a disconnect between people in their daily lives and really having a connection with all these institutions and all what they have to offer. Even though the numbers are great, I think that once the ones that make it there, then they find many other issues that it's hard for them to actually stay in school. And I've spoken to a few parents of kids that have dropped out, and it's interesting to see and to get some of their perspectives. So what I found throughout the years is that there's a huge weight in the your family heritage and what you bring from where you came from. I mean, I was lucky enough. I came from a middle class family. Even though we came from Cuba, we were poorer than poor. I still viewed an education as something positive and attainable. Many people that come from poorer countries, really, it's hard for them to see that small gap makes a huge difference in in the kids being able to say, hey, this is something that I can achieve. The other thing is that kids, from a younger age, their families are poor. They're really not making a lot of money. Everything is getting more expensive, and then their families is actually pressuring them to find paid work to support the family. So, what do you mean you're going there, messing around with books, to get something, in a couple of years? If so, when you actually need to be working now because we have a problem today. So it's very hard for Hispanics, first generation and second generation too, that to find the impact. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have a degree in 2 years versus I need work now. So what I've seen is that once the parents are recruited, just like the students are into the system, is actually they have a better chance of making it through. So one of the other problems that I found is with representation. So representation, and these are two Hispanic American astronauts that if you show these pictures to the majority of Hispanics, they don't know who they are. Now if you show them a picture of a basketball player, they might know who they are. And I think this is part of the problem. Like these guys, they're basically heroes. They are they made it to NASA. They went to the space station, and the hard work that it takes is just very hard, and people don't have an idea of who they are. And the other problem is that for many kids and for many people that come from poorer families, they do not understand what a STEM job looks like. They cannot comprehend. When you come and your family comes from a poor background, you come from the fields, or you come from something that has nothing to do with technology or with education, with math, with science, it's very hard for them to comprehend what it means to be sitting behind a desk working at a computer doing something, or making experiments in a lab, or doing presentations, or basically having any type of interaction. So it's hard for them to see, to actually have this picture. So if the parents are not sold, the kids don't understand. It's very hard for them. And we're gonna get to what can the educators do to help. And I think it's an excellent question. So, but what I find interesting is that, especially for technology education and STEM types of careers, there is a huge disconnect, not only in representation, but also in visualization. What do these things, look like? So, go next here. So, what we've seen that works is that the schools that are prepared and the schools that do well, they understand that, these kids need to have, work study, type of opportunities. And I know, Steve, you can mention the, some of the experiences that you guys had at the beginning, trying to get kids into internships, and that the parents would tell them, what do you mean unpaid internship? They have to be, making money. You don't work for free. And it's something that, from the culture, and now, that's changed. But the kids, they have to have the opportunities to be able to have, work study, type of programs. So they come to school, they stay in school or in the environment, or, the type of work opportunity connected to the school, and it becomes part of their success. Also, the class schedules, they need to be flexible. And I know that there's a lot of flexibility overall, in the college system. But, what we've seen is that, the better chance you have of being able to take, the same types of courses at different times, depending on your work schedule, it makes it easier for kids to actually finish. Also, having, a staff that's culturally sensitive. It is, it's very hard to identify with somebody that has come from another country, that doesn't understand the culture, and that they basically leave. I mean, when you go, and to some of these families' houses, and you have dinner with them, you realize that they're still living in their country. They're just located now in the United States. So that's something that's really interesting, especially on TV. And you see a lot of the people that call and talk to you, and the types of questions that they ask. They're telling you that, I live here and I'm, making a living here, but my mind is still over there. So understanding that, it actually helps the kids, with the family dynamics. We also seen, and, some of the studies have found that for the kids to actually stay in school, and many of the ones that had the choice or had the doubts of, leaving or staying, they find that by having a personal connection, or having a relationship, or a mentor as part in the staff, or, in the school, it helps them actually stay the course. And, those are the ones that tell them, hang in there. You can make it, you can go through, what are you going to do? You're not gonna, get anything done if you leave. So, and, a huge problem, and, it's still, even though the college system, and the community college system in California is, incredibly affordable compared to, even many parts of the country, you find that at the poverty levels and at the income levels that we're talking about for Hispanic students, it's still very expensive, and it's still very, hard to attain. So, having better understanding, and having better knowledge and access to financial assistance, in as many ways, it will help, these students, succeed, because now they can actually see a path of, being able to finish, and then, being done with school. There's also a cultural problem, that the culture in this country, when you don't have any money, or you don't have, for Hispanics, it's very hard for them to understand the concept of getting in debt to get an education. So that's something that the parents need to understand how the system works. There's needs to be better communication on how that works, because they come into school, and remember, many of these people, and we've seen, they are not necessarily homeowners. They haven't made any big financial transactions, and you find that, this is daunting. So for a kid that, that comes from, a developed background, I just fill up my applications, do what I need to do, get a college loan, do whatever, they see that as part of the system. For a Hispanic kid that comes from a first generation, or even some second generation households, they see this as a huge hurdle, and, something that is very hard to overcome. So that was basically it for me. Do you guys have any questions? I can't hear you, Steve.
I remember in the Salinas area, we were trying to get internships set up for the students there, but I think it's about 80% Hispanic up there. The family influence very strong. The parents wouldn't let their children take the internships, so we had to kind of bypass the system. I hope no one in a controlling interest is listening here, because we were able to redirect the funds and actually pay the students to be interns, and that helped a lot in that particular area. So that is, so what would you, it's getting back to the question we had, what can educators do? I mean, obviously we have a system here that we're working in, and people have different paid roles and responsibilities. And if we were to design, I mean, I have access to auxiliary funds, and we have a team of people, deputy sector navigators, that can help. And I see Dwayne Reinhardt has chimed in, and he's very much involved in the Imperial Valley, which is the lower southeast corner of California. And he's very interested in, should he be developing materials in Spanish language or not, to talk about some of our entry-level programs. What kind of comment would you have on that?
I think that materials in Spanish are super important, because it will give access not necessarily to the kids, because I mean the kids come here, and the younger they come, the easier it is for them, to adapt, and they start functioning in English, very quickly. But the parents are the ones that are an obstacle in many ways. So the outreach needs to happen beyond the kids. It needs to happen with the parents. And also, I mean, having access to Hispanic and Spanish language media would help a lot. Be able to do open houses, of actually bringing in the kids and the parents. I mean, there's a huge cultural difference between the U.S. The raised and born kids to many Hispanic countries. The culture here is, you're 18 years old, you're an adult, do what you want, you can leave the house, you are autonomous because, you've been raised to work within the system. In a Hispanic household, it's very, very different. It's very, more dependent. They depend more on their parents. They don't necessarily see that, 18 years old and, leave the house. So it's like if you're talking to a younger kid to an extent, So I think that for colleges and for schools, that if you want to increase, recruitment and retention, I mean, use the media to your advantage, because guess what? They are there. They have 24 hours of news, and you can access that. It is very quickly, depending on the area that you're at. Pick up the phone, talk to your local Telemundo, Univision station, or radio station, or regional Mexican, or whatever format is closer to your area, and say, hey guys, we have these programs, and be able to work with them and get the word out. You'd be surprised how many doors are open to you for an educational type of PSA, because guess what? When you listen to the stations, they already have many like government type of PSAs, but none of them necessarily come from the school system.
So if sequentially, what I'm hearing from you, and I've seen you do this before when we ran some of our Tecnifica days, is you would do the outreach to what I call audio media, which is radio and TV. And then from that, you would attract the people, which would include the families, to a location. And that's when you do the talking.
Right. So and you find that I mean, in my case it gets a little easier because but they know, or they might know who we are, or they've heard of us because we've been doing it for a long time. But it's actually not hard at all. And the outreach happened. We'll go to the local station. Show up in the newscast. Do a segment. Talk about the initiative and whatever it was, and invite people to come over. And this will happen with a few stations, even with a few radio stations, and then we'll send out a blast, get to people on social media. The interesting thing is that now this was not possible before. Now you can actually do the same thing, but you can actually do it through social media, and then you can promote it through social media, and then you can actually target the people that you want to do the outreach in social media as well, which is a million times more effective. So one is broadcast and pray. The other one is promote and target. And I think that is a lot more efficient for attracting people to an event or initiative. So it's just when we were doing the Tecnifica conferences, this was not an option, but now it is.
Yeah, no, I can see that. What sort of social media platforms are most successful with the Spanish speaking or the family side of this?
I think the most effective one is still Facebook. And I find, there are many people that, that reach out to us, through Facebook. Instagram is younger, is more connected, but for the heavy, Spanish speaker, Facebook is like the entry level social network where you can find it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. And I've seen some questions here on the side. What I'm reading, if I skim these chat box things, is like, yeah, this is great. How do I do it? Because there's really no way for me to do it. And of course, I'm glad that Suzanne and Dwayne and Peter are on this call today, because we're in a unique role where we can try to bring about programs to address the issue. But it's very important that we have champions on college campuses, because if we just go in by ourselves, we're powerless. We have to find somebody who wants to speak with us, who represents that college. And then usually with that and a little bit of money, grant money, we can do things. So tell me a little bit more, Ariel, unless somebody else has another question. How is it going with Tu Tecnología? What is the scope of what you're doing nationally? Is that still a live and vibrant organization helping people?
Well, it is, but we're focusing more, on the TV side, on the segments, and basically more on the media side, because it's just, it's very taxing. It's really a lot of work. So, I also have a couple of other companies that I run that are taking a lot more of my time, these days. But, we still keep up with Tu Tecnología. We're still, on TV every other week. Like next week, we're doing a huge event from New York. So, so far so good. We're doing great. It's just, we've adapted and, to the times and to our availability, But remember that, many of these initiatives, we've done it, as a nonprofit, type of initiative, educationally. So it really depends on the availability. And, I think that the results have been great.
So why did you leave California? Why did you go to Florida? I mean, what's going on?
Well, when I was in California, I was doing, TV and showing up at the Univision 34 local station. Now, for you guys, as a reference, Univision 34 is the largest TV station in the nation in any language. And it happens to be in LA in Spanish. So that's an idea, so understand the amount of the Spanish speaking people you have in California. I know you know the numbers, but it puts it in perspective. I came to Miami because I was, getting calls from the network that is actually here in Miami, and it was, happening all the time. And it got to the point that I said, okay, I need to be closer to it, because it's not like, TV producers are not great planners. They will tell you, hey, I have a segment tomorrow. Are you in or out? And if you're in California, it's a little bit harder to get on a plane and be here next day. So that's what happened. And by being here, we actually have better access to working with the networks at a national level.
Well, I know Miami-Dade Community College system is pretty spectacular. Have you seen or heard of any other college systems throughout the country that are doing especially good at outreach to Hispanics or Spanish-speaking families?
I know in Texas they're doing really well, and then Miami-Dade is doing really well. Also a couple in the Northeast, but I think that the Miami-Dade is probably, I would say, one of the best.
Yeah, it's good to hear some lessons to learn from that. Well, I certainly hope that we can find an opportunity to bring you out here again in the future and work with you on organizing maybe Tecnificate 2. And I think the time is right. And so let's plan on that. I've certainly talked to my team about doing that, because it does seem like you have to do the outreach over the media channels and then attract people to a location. And then that's when you have to serve up. These are all the alternatives. And maybe some of the other educators on the phone have on the bridge have some sort of idea as to what we can do. And of course, we'll be promoting this recording, which I think is invaluable. It's the stuff you've been telling to me for years. I'm so glad we were able to capture it this morning. and we'll be pumping it out there to everybody who went on spring break, and we'll catch them on the rebound. Anybody else have any other questions?
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
I'm Dwayne Reinhardt. I was actually reading from Peter Katz's question about the community outreach, and this is one of my areas where I want to focus a little bit as well, especially in South County on the border with Tijuana or Mexicali. But I have no problem outreaching to not only Univision or Telemundo, but I also wanted to find out, similar to Peter Katz's question, would a community event where the people are gathered be some more of a place where we would only distribute trifolds to people in Spanish language, or would it be more effective if we actually had a presentation or demonstration booth or some type of area where people could actually touch the technology, the families can see it and learn about the different career paths in that area? And I was also thinking, but I don't know if this has been replicated somewhere else, about having some type of mobile center, like a little technology bus that drives around the neighborhood like a library, that would have some computers. And maybe public libraries already do stuff like that. I think in rural areas, they currently do stuff like that. Perhaps having somebody go around and speak with them about different opportunities in the career paths and specifics, the programs that could help the students get to those areas, or maybe even their parents, have them all come in as a family and study together.
Right.
Might be something that would be there. But has that been replicated, and is that effective in other areas of the country?
Well, what I've seen, and I think that what works, really well, if you really want to know what events are going on, you call your same Univision or Telemundo station and you ask them for an event calendar. They usually have a yearly event calendar, and they're going to tell you what some of the biggest events are that are Hispanic centric, because they're covering them. So in many cases, they're partnering with them. Now you have to call both, because they might actually have a stake in the event. And if they're sponsoring the event themselves, the other network might not be included. So that's why you call both. You get your event calendar, and then you can show up with a booth, you can show up with a bus. But I think that some of the most effective way of communicating what these careers and what these opportunities are is that you need to be specific. What I found is that it's very hard for somebody to understand STEM. It's very abstract. What do you mean that you can do this, or science, or engineering, or math? It has to be more specific, saying, hey, we're offering this program where in this time you can become this type of technician, engineer, programmer, or a lab technician or whatever. And by the time you're done, the industry says that you can make this much. Okay, so
the other, I think what I hear you saying, Ariel, and I think we saw it at the Santa Barbara one, is that STEM and these career things may not be that popular enough to draw all in of themselves. Piggybacking on those other events, like you said, get the list of all the events that are out there, and then piggyback on that and bring it in. I remember the Santa Barbara one, we had someone there to speak a little bit about the latest policy on immigration and that sort of thing, and we pretty much blew out the walls of the place because everybody wanted to hear that immigration policy. Plus, we had good food out in the courtyard, and so it was a combination of it was a place to come for many things. But I think our marketing role is to get our foot in the door,
right,
along with that.
Right, and going to the event, setting up a booth. I mean, if you look at like the health fairs that they do in LA, I mean, they have 50,000 people going to those things. So they're humongous events. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I think that it's really good to do outreach and bring people to you, and be able to really hold people for a while. But to even get there, you might want to join something that's already happening and then show up and bring in people. And try to bring in people that can speak Spanish, that can actually do or a presentation at the event, or be part of the event, and then have a booth and be able to follow up. And you'd be surprised how many leads, how many people you actually generate, and how much interest you can actually garner by participating that way.
Yeah, in my case, just the final question that I had also, I have been approached by the San Diego County Office of Education to do some presentations in K to 12, and I'm okay with that because I speak Spanish in South County and maybe in Imperial County as well, close to the border areas. But the question I had in the back of my mind is, how effective is that really going to be if I'm presenting to just the students who presumably would have known more English already in that school system, even if they're in Spanish already? Maybe they're more affluent Mexicans who are just living on the north side of the border. But I thought about how much of an impact the presentations and the demonstrations would have with regard to outreach to the whole family, because the decision influencers are going to be the parents and extended family, and not just the kids who bring home a little flyer that may be in Spanish. But the parents, if they're not at that presentation, aren't going to have a full view of, here's why my kid could be successful in IT.
Exactly, and I think you got it. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, talking to the kids is one thing, but they actually need to have, the parents need to have the full buy-in, because they are the ones that are putting in the pressure. They're the ones that are telling them, go to school, I'll take care of this, or go to school, work part-time, I'll take care of this, or we're drowning, you need to be working, what are you doing? Playing with books. So that's it makes all the difference in the world. And that's why those types of events are good, because you actually go with the family. So you can reach several people of the same family at the same place. So
yeah,
there's
it's not to discount the school stuff, but I thought it might be better to hit some of the parent-teacher groups, some of the community centers, and some of the fairs and community events and events organized around the community, rather than just hitting the students because of this strong influencer or even decision maker, which is not in the
exactly.
student.
And when we did those events in California, whole families will come in. So it was really interesting because you will see everybody. You see mom, dad, kids, even little kids. So you will see everybody, and it was very interesting because you have people speaking about stuff that was cool, but not to a 5-year-old. So it would you will get a little bit of everything there. But it was interesting, and it makes sense. It makes sense to reach the whole family, so they understand the implications, and to have and be able to tell them here's a clear path of for success, instead of go to school, graduate with something eventually, that and find yourself in in the system. The sooner you can get them to commit to an outcome, the better I think it's going to be for them. They're more likely to be able to stay throughout.
And it sounds like the outcome might be linked to the overall success of the family and not to the individual. It's one of the lessons I learned from you early on is, for example, if you're giving a prize in a raffle, if it's an individual prize, it's not as valuable as a family prize. And that was part of it. Also, I wanted to recall that we used pamphlets for some of our marketing for the Tecnificate in College of the Canyons, and we brought them to the groceries that specialized in Hispanic foods. We also brought them to the churches, the Catholic churches that had a lot of the population there as well. So there's lots of ways, but I love this idea that it's really a cultural family approach. And once we realize that, I'm not sure how big a role the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce can play, but we've talked to them and worked with them on some other projects. They seem very enthusiastic about working with us. But we're learning how many steps removed some of these people are, even though they're in the Hispanic community, from actually speaking Spanish. I remember for a lot of our events, we asked Spanish representing or Hispanic representing elected officials to come, and they had to be briefed on how to speak Spanish, even though they sure pronounced their names in a very Hispanic dialect. When they came to, can you give a talk in Spanish? They're like, oh no, I don't know how to speak Spanish. Remember that?
Yep.
So
sure.
There are many different degrees of separation within the Hispanic community and the Spanish speaking on who you're talking to and who's in or out of different groups. Well,
Steve,
Yes.
Can I just because Dwayne, I wanted to thank Dwayne for the shout out there and also for digging a little bit deeper into my question. There was one aspect though that I really didn't really get a good sense of. Dwayne mentioned a number of events that he's thinking of doing that are more family centric or more focused than say a large job fair or a health fair or something like that, where you get hundreds of people. Where you kind of get lost in the noise. And I agree with Dwayne in that, I've always had better success if I'm at a PTA meeting or if I'm at a church group meeting or something like that is definitely more smaller and family and community focused. And I just really want to get a sense of, what have you found to be the best touch points beyond, a large fair or something, that has a greater topic benefit to it? Are there other touch points that we should be looking at?
Well, I mean, in my case, it's a little bit unfair because I actually get on TV and, talk to a large number of people. So, I think that, Dwayne, I mean, you obviously are have your own approach. I mean, but, the model that we found that worked was, get a broadcast and bring everybody in. And then, you have, at least that initial conversation. And, part of that broadcast and part of that outreach included, some of those, more one-on-one or, smaller, types of venues like churches and small business groups and things like that. But it also included radio. I mean, what happens whenever you're promoting something like this, the more touch points, the better. And if they hear the message in more than one place, the better. So one thing is if they hear it on the radio, it's fine, but if they heard it on the radio and then saw it on TV and then, word had another touch point about it, now you have a lot better chance of somebody, even, showing up.
Thank you, Peter. I think there's a lot of unique things about this market. And of course, bringing them in is only step one. I like the points you made earlier, Ariel, about the work study and the retention and the mentorship. This was the same kind of information that was brought up in when the Corporation for Latin Inclusion put together their study on ICT that we have from about 8 years ago. It said the role of having a clear pathway, and we have a guided pathway structure that we are advocating right now in IT and some others. Having a clear structure and having mentors and help and people that can help carry them through and provide the assurance is a critical aspect of helping these people. And of course, with our student populations, over 50% Hispanic in the community college system. And we have probably the best interface around for addressing this population that there is. And we're very happy that in our IT space, we've been able to figure out a pathway and connect it to a 4-year degree, even if it is private through National University and some of the others. So there is upward mobility. It isn't a glass ceiling, and we're very happy about that. So we've been making progress in California. It's slow.
That's great.
But we miss you out here, and we'll try to do something to get you back. And thank you so much, Ariel, for joining us today. You are a powerhouse in the Spanish language world, doing a lot of good for a lot of people. I'm honored to know you, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure.
All right. And we'll let it go at that. Thank you all very much. This will be recorded and available for you. It is recorded, and it's available for you on our website.